Well, the Fashion Jewelry and Accessories Trade Association is a member-supported trade association representing the interests of its members. Why have a trade association? Because we need a voice for the industry, and without that voice for the industry, legislative interests can run unchecked, and the industry needs to be represented. So the future of our industry is affected by our actions, and together we can affect positive change. We need to come together as a group and positively represent the industry. FJATA members are a special group of people. They get it. In this sea of regulatory activity, FJATA members are funding the effort to attack the misleading and negative press, harmonize standards worldwide, actively work to harness the legislative landscape, and most important, to keep our members informed of all of these changes as they take place so that they can more effectively run their business. Now, our association goes back to the Burlington Coat Factory Prop 65 first jewelry violation. Thank you. At any rate, at the time that all of the signatories were signing this Burlington Coat settlement agreement, they realized that something had to be done, that the industry had to be represented. And so they decided that rather than fund that effort individually, they would form a trade association that would represent the collective interests of the body. So as a result of that, FJATA was born. Since that time, we have become the regulatory advocacy association representing the jewelry and accessories industries in all legislative matters, but also in the press. As you remember, back in January of 2010, there was a news article that hit the Associated Press talking about cadmium in children's products, talking about how dangerous this was. And so as an industry trade association, we had to get actively involved in that charge. So in doing that, I started, this was right at the time that I joined the association, but at that time we were trying to find where the science was and what was actually considered the toxicological effect of the presence of cadmium in jewelry, and found that there wasn't any. So what we first decided we needed to do was conduct the science. So we immediately started performing our own testing, which was given to Exponent, a California scientific company for analysis. And at that time, the CPSC learned that we were doing this testing and decided they were going to run their own tests. This was also concurrent with another effort that was underway, and that was through the ASTM process, which is the ASTM International, which had a committee formed, the F-1524, which was establishing the jewelry safety requirements for all jewelry, for all known hazards and of toxics in jewelry. So we were, we were developing that standard, which was a 2-year process. At the time that standard was completed, we found that the Consumer Product Safety Commission test and our test all reached the same conclusion. Cadmium really doesn't migrate that well from jewelry, and I'll discuss that a little more in later slides. But basically, in our test, we were trying to determine what was the relationship between the total content and migration of cadmium in metal products, and we found that cadmium really doesn't migrate well. In fact, here we were taking total content, ppms, of 12,000 on the first line, which had a migratable effect under the EN71-3 test that was non-detect. If we used the 6-hour test from CPSC, it migrated 16 micrograms, and in the CPSC 24-hour test, it only migrated 7.86 micrograms. Now this, of course, is relative to the fact that CPSC determined that 200 micrograms a day would be a safe exposure for this application. We also found that whether it had an economy plating or a quality plating, and also the finishing that would accompany that, also had an effect. Literally, the better the finishing and the more plating and surface coating you had, the less migration was there. But the key is that we found that there is no correlation between total content and migratability. This is important because in many state legislations, they use a total content testing, which is totally meaningless in a risk exposure environment. And actually, cadmium is present in almost everything in trace amounts. It's in food because of what's in the ground, but actually cigarette smoke is the #1 contributing factor of cadmium to humans. and that would be also for the smoker and secondhand smoke as well. So anyway, we had to evaluate the exposure. And through the ASTM group, we worked with expert toxicologists and CPSC, we worked with Health Canada and other stakeholders, and we led the effort to develop the children's jewelry safety standard. So we finished that standard. It is the ASTM F2923-11, and this standard, again, is a comprehensive standard addressing all known hazards and risks relating to children's jewelry. It adopts a 300 ppm screening level, which was a negotiated level. Obviously, you remember from earlier slides, 300 ppm will always give you a non-detect. Even much higher quantities than that will often give you a non-detect. But this gave the industry an inexpensive way to use an XRF gun. If you came out at 300 ppm or less, you were good. If you failed that test, our standard gave you a migration option, where you could then do a CPSC sponsored test that was a 24-hour heated agitated test. If that yielded less than 200 micrograms, which they deemed to be safe, a safe level for acute exposure, then you would be within safety realms. So we also went and established limits for paint, which is similar to the F963, which is used in toys, mostly because the industry and the representatives on that call said that they didn't have a problem achieving those levels. We also went on to address nickel, magnets, and batteries, which to me, magnets and batteries are the far greater hazard to all known hazards and risks in children's jewelry, because that results in emergency room visits and often, sometimes, surgery. So the F2923 is the first peer-reviewed science-based standard in existence that deals with children's jewelry. It's a result of close cooperation of the industry, and we're very proud of the accomplishment of the industry and its ability to get this done. And it clearly identifies all scientific risks, and it was the baseline for which we then went on to develop an adult standard. Now, there have been some people who have called me and said, why is it that we need an adult standard? Well, that is because some retailers find it difficult to separate the difference between children's product and adult product, and so they were just saying, well, make all of our jewelry comply with the children's standard. Well, this was putting undue regulation on adult product, because actually the pathway to exposure, we found, is different from children to adults. It is more likely for a child to eat a component part than it would be for an adult, for an example. So in the adult standard, which is now published and finished under the ASTM F2999-13, incidentally, the -13, that's the year that it was developed. So of course, if this ever got updated in future years, it'd be -14. You can always know then that you have the most current copy. But we found that with the difference of the exposure levels, that we went with a 1.5% total content migration for cadmium. The surface coatings was the same as 2923, again, because the industry had little difficulty complying with that. We dealt with nickel release, liquid filled, magnets, all based on potential of adult exposure pathways. Now, there are children's bills out there that regulate cadmium now. One problem we have, and I just left a meeting in Vienna, Austria, where worldwide industry leaders were talking about what we can do to promote international trade. There were two common themes that needed to be addressed. One were tariffs. The second was harmonization of standards. That with having differing regulations between different countries and areas of the world, you end up with non-compliant and non-conforming product. So our goal is to go after each of these states and have them conform to our standard. This is one of our primary tasks. Once we gain this harmonization, we will then have the momentum to reach out to Health Canada, to the EU with this science-based, widely accepted children's standard. Now, as we went through this effort, we were able to present a law in Rhode Island based on our standard that passed last year. So we actually have a state that has now made our standard mandatory and law. And a recent development is we're now talking to Massachusetts, who has their bill, the S990, which again is a cadmium bill that's out there that regulates jewelry for children 6 and under to 75 ppm soluble. So when I talked to the bill sponsor on that, I started saying, geez, we can't support that. She said, well, you supported it a couple of years ago, what's different? And I said, well, what's different now is we have the ASTM 2923 standard that is finished. She was quite interested in that, and I have an appointment with her, and it looks like we're going to be able to get that bill re-sponsored next year to our standard. So this is the signing of our bill in Rhode Island. Of course, it was quite an event. There is also a video on our website, which is FJATA.org, where you can watch the development of our bill and what we went through to have it passed in the state. Along with our proactive effort to enact bills, of course, our job is also to kill the bad ones. And I'm very proud to say that right now as we speak, most legislative seasons are coming to a close. There has not been a bill enacted this year, and I believe that's due to our hard work. This was an example of a Connecticut bill that died. As many of you know, the way a lot of bills die is they are assigned to a committee before they are put up for a vote, and the committee just refuses to pass it, and so therefore it dies. So we have been building foundation, again, to complete the cadmium risk assessment. We have completed the ASTM children's standard. We have completed the ASTM adult standard, which again gives you an opportunity as retailers and also as suppliers to retailers to rally behind this cause, because they don't have to have a standard that's different than this. They could all conform to this. It is known to be safe, and we need to build support for this standard. We have passed Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Maine laws regarding button cell batteries. We have passed the New York Senate with our bill, the cadmium bill, which is the S4055. Rhode Island, again, has passed a law, and we're actively involved in Connecticut, Maryland, New York, and now Massachusetts to develop proactive laws in those states. So we also advocate in print, hearings, meetings and calls. We joined the industry when we were looking at how to comply with conflict minerals, Dodd-Frank, the FTC. Basically, if you go to our free area of the website, you can get general information on all of these issues. What we do on our private site, which is only available to members, is to take it into greater detail and actually do the work for you. If you wonder what you need to do to comply with Dodd-Frank, and you're a member, you can go to our website and we'll give you the forms there to use, and we'll give you instructions of how to comply. We've also built very successful state and federal legislative relationships. We've consulted to our members. We have a free consulting service. If you have a question about whether your product complies or not, you can submit your question to our office, and we'll generally get back to you within 24 hours. And we have a dedicated membership to get involved. You know, we give an opportunity for our members to actually appear before committees and help represent the cause. So the global harmonization is a key deterrent to doing business, and is also something that is very prime on our list, keeping in mind that our primary focus is to resolve the Prop 65 issue. And right now, the latest development is Governor Brown has realized that the enforcement provisions of Prop 65 is structurally unsound. It has turned into what has been referred to as a bounty hunter initiative, where it has been called legal extortion, where now when a company receives a 60-day notice, the least avenue of resistance is to pay the fine of $35,000, $45,000 often. The problem is, as soon as they pick up the phone and talk to their attorney about defending their rights in this case, that's when the clock starts, and after spending $200,000 or $300,000, they'll still end up settling for that $35,000 or $45,000. So it's a very unfortunate, untenable situation, and is part of our end game strategy. So it is only with the support of the industry that we can afford to accomplish these goals. The work of FJATA benefits the industry, and we ask the industry to support this effort. And I thank you for the opportunity to be here.